Ever wonder why investors pass on great pitches with perfect clarity? After years as a VC, I've watched hundreds of clear pitches fall flat simply because they failed to make me feel anything. And what I've seen from helping founders raise over $250 million is that fundamentally, investors don't necessarily care about your business alone. So in this video, I'm going to show you the proven 4-step system I used to help Marco raise a $2.2 million seed round, revealing how to make every investor care in a much more fast manner. But before I show you the system, let me prove why it works by taking you behind the scenes of how VCs actually make decisions, because what I discovered will probably shock you. When I was a VC, whenever we met a company, after the meeting, my colleagues and I would chat about how the meeting went. And during these, we never really spoke about the business, but rather how the founder and the whole conversation and meeting made us feel. And after doing more research and being a part of over 120 plus successful funding rounds now, here's the biggest thing that I found. The founders who got funded weren't the ones with the best business models, but they were the ones who made me feel something specific in the first 10 minutes of every meeting, and then kept that feeling high towards the end and in subsequent meetings as you went on. And that's the feeling that we need to get to when we come to a fundraise. And that's why people like Marco was able to raise for his round, because he was focusing on making investors actually want to invest using psychology and their own emotion-driven decision-making, and not just trying to tell them every bit of information about his business. And that's the biggest thing that I see founders do wrong, is you're just too focused on telling everything about everything they need to know and making them want to invest. And look, by the way, if you want to get more actionable tips on how to fundraise in your inbox every week, check the link below to get it. You'll get 4 AI tools to help you fundraise. But let me show you this emotion to action system first, because once you understand it, you're never going to really approach investor meetings the same way again, and it will exponentially increase your chances of successfully fundraising for your startup. Because here's the thing that most founders completely miss. Every investor conversation is actually a tool to transfer emotion and drive action into what you're doing. The problem is most founders focus on the information transfer, but the funded ones, they master the emotion transfer. And that's fundamentally what we're trying to do here throughout these 4 steps. So let me break this down for you. So let's focus on step 1 first. I remember working with a founder who completely got this concept. They were building in an industry that was heading towards massive disruption, and they realized something crucial. They wanted investors to feel the same urgency about their product that people feel about climate change. And this is a really common example that I use all the time. I want you to think about it. When you hear climate change, you don't just think, oh, that's interesting, I guess. You feel this deep, urgent sense of, if we don't act now, everything's falling apart, the whole world's going to fall apart, and everything's going to die. And that's crazy. But that's exactly the emotion this founder wanted to create. So we spent weeks crafting their narrative around this idea. If their vision didn't happen, if the industry didn't transform in the next 2 to 3 years, the entire sector would crumble. And something needed to be solved now, otherwise it would never happen. And look, they had all the data and the insights to prove it. So when they walked into investor meetings, they weren't just presenting a business opportunity. They were presenting the last chance to be part of a solution before everything else collapsed. And look, that's exactly what step 1 is. You need to decide what you want them to feel before you can even start to build a great emotional narrative. Now, what was the result for that founder? They were able to raise $1.5 million because investors felt the same urgent, we have to act now emotion. Think about this. Compare that to the countless founders I saw as a VC who just winged it. They walk in with good ideas, maybe a solid team, decent markets, but no real intentional emotional strategy. And usually what happens there is the emotions meetings felt haphazard. And I would always walk out thinking, that was fine, but not really feeling anything specific, no urgency, no excitement, no clear emotion. And do you want to know what happens when investors don't really feel anything? They don't follow up or have any sense of connection to you and what you're doing. And you've probably seen that yourself, where you've come out of a meeting and you've not really felt there was an emotion there. So before your next call, I don't want you just to prep your slides. You need to ask yourself, What emotion do I want to create by the end of this meeting? What is that emotion? And this goes for every single meeting you do. So for most first meetings, for example, it's that excitement and trust. Excitement about the vision, trust in you as a founder and as a builder, a sense of, I need to be in this round and spend more information on it. And in the second or third meeting, this is where the emotion shifts. Maybe it's more confidence in your execution. Maybe it's more around the vision. Maybe it's more around the signals and urgency before others get in. But whatever it is, you need to be intentional about it. You need to sit down and actually think about, okay, what emotion do I actually want and give an investor that makes an investor lean in, and the things I say pushes them towards that emotion. But once we have this, we need to make investors actually do the things we want them to. And that takes us nicely into the second step for this. So step 2, if you don't know what specific next step you want the investor to take, what you're essentially doing is you're driving around without putting a destination into your GPS and just hoping to God that you're going to be able to get there. You might be moving, you might even be going super fast, but you have no idea if you're heading towards your goal or driving around in circles. And that's exactly what happens in investor meetings when founders don't define the specific action they want. Maybe they present well, they answer questions, but at the end of the day, everyone's just sitting there wondering, so what happens next then? Do you want a second meeting? How do you want them to act in that meeting? The way in which you frame the end of your call and the way in which you talk about your narrative, you need to make them feel like the next step matters. I remember sitting in partner meetings where someone would pitch a company they met the day before, and if that founder gave a clear story, a feeling of momentum and a sharp insight, then the partner could sell it internally. But if it was vague or flat, it was dead on arrival really. And this is the biggest thing that you need to focus on, is how do you drive the action to make them want to do the things you want to do? You need to make it easy for them to explain to others. And that's exactly what step 2 is. You need to define the specific action that you want the investor to take and then completely change your narrative around making sure that action actually happens. But how do you actually do this? So here's what you do. Before every investor conversation, write down the specific action you want them to take. Not, I hope they're interested by the end of it. Nothing like that, right? But something like, I want them to schedule a second meeting next week, or I want them to introduce me to their partner who leads the sector, or I want them to spend more time researching GTM or market or product, whatever it is. It depends on really what's happening in the funding round and everything like that. But the thing is, once you have this, you can structure your entire conversations to guide them towards that specific goal. And this will change how you think about setting up your meeting, what you speak about, and how you speak about it. But you're probably asking, how do you actually make them take the action? What does that actually look like? That takes us to step 3 of this simple formula to really hone into how you make investors love you. So step 3, I'll never forget working with this one founder who was pitching a performance optimization platform. And when we first started working together, his pitches felt pretty standard. Good market, solid product, decent traction, but nothing really made investors lean in. And he kept getting investors to reject him, basically. They just kept saying, no, you're too early, the classic stuff like that. So I helped him craft his personal story. He'd been a professional golfer, and we worked together to connect that experience to his business in a way that would actually create raw emotion. And here's exactly what we developed. He would talk about what it took to get to the top of a professional golf. So the mental pressure, the constant performance optimization, the way tiny improvements could make or break your career, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning just to hit golf balls. But here's where he made it emotional. He opened up about how that world affected him. The isolation, the pressure, the way athletes push through pain and mental barriers that most people never face. And then he connected it directly to why he was as obsessed with helping other high performers optimize their performance and their potential. And when he started using this story in investor meetings, the room would completely shift. Suddenly, this wasn't just another SaaS app pitch. This was a founder who'd lived the problem in most intense way possible. He understood the performance and optimization at a level that no one else in the room could, including investors. And fundamentally, the investors lent in. They started asking follow-up questions about his golf career. You spent 10, 15 minutes just talking about that at one point, connecting his athletic insights to business applications. That personal story didn't just explain his expertise, it made them feel his unique authority and obsession with the problem that he was trying to create. And You don't have to have this perfect level of story, but you need to think about what it could be. And that's exactly how you make investors take the action you need, by telling your stories to create that emotion and action. And he raised his round because investors felt that deep personal connection to why he was the right person to solve this problem. Now, founders always tell me, I don't know how to tell stories, or I don't have any stories to tell, I've not done anything. But the thing is, you do. You just don't know which ones matter, and you haven't done the work to actually understand which stories or things you've done in your life matter to you. Because your job is to pull from your own life, just like I'm doing now. You've lived stories that prove why this market matters to you, why you're obsessed with the problem, why this team is the one, and really why you're doing this company instead of everything else in the world. And you need to sit down, you need to think about, why am I doing this? Why is it this? So here's your homework for that. Write down 3 personal stories that connect you to your business. Maybe it's why you first encountered the problem. Maybe it's the moment when you realize the solution. Maybe it's what drives your obsession with this market. There's going to be some level of story or event that happened to you that's put you on the trajectory of right now. And that could be, you could be aged 8, 9, 10. It could be in your 20s. It doesn't matter the age. And you want to go as far back as possible to find the perfect story. Then what you need to do is you need to start practice weaving in one of those stories into your pitch at the moment when you need to create that specific emotion that we identified in step 1. But the thing is though, you need to know when to use each story and how. And that really takes us on to step 4. So this is what step 4 is. I want you to think of this step as a bit like dating. You don't propose on the first date, right? You start by creating interest, and then you build connection, and then trust, and only then do you move towards commitment. And investors' relationships work exactly the same way. You can't just jump straight to give me money any more than you can just jump straight to marry me on the first date. You have to guide them through the emotional progression of investor psychology and fundraising. And that's really what step 4 is. It's understanding the funnel of emotion towards action and when to use which one. Here's how it plays out in real time during a funding round. So in the first meeting, you want to spark curiosity, you want to show clarity, you want to leave them wanting more. You're not just closing around here, you're earning the right to the next step. This is like that first date where you're just trying to get them interested enough to see you again, and you're trying to understand about them as well. And this is where 99% of founders go wrong, where you're trying to make the investor invest into you in the first meeting. We're just trying to build a connection and see if we want to spend more time together. From the second meeting onwards, you want to build belief. You want to make them feel your inevitability. You want to bring insight and proof. And now you're building that deeper connection and trust because they've had some level of understanding of you. As we move into the 3rd and 4th and 5th meetings, you want to shift the energy to urgency. You want to make them feel like you're picking them. And this is where that dynamic flips and why investor psychology is so important, just like in dating. Because once someone is really interested, they start worrying about whether you'll choose them. You need to decide on who you're going to keep going with or you're not going to go with, whether or not you become official or not. And these are things that you need to do in those push and pulls that are so important. But at every step, you need to ask, what do I want them to feel right now? What do I want them to do next? What is the emotional funnel at my stage that makes sense for either this story or how I talk about it? So you need to map out your fundraising process. What emotion and action do you want in meeting 1? What about meeting 2? What about meeting 3? How does it change as you go through in the different conversations you've had? You can't leave it to chance. You've got to design the emotional journey and be really malleable as you go through, depending on what happens with the investors. So putting it all together, here's what makes this system so powerful when it comes to fundraising. It turns every investor meeting into a strategic emotional journey instead of a random information dump that doesn't really help them in any way. And investors don't invest because you gave a clear explanation. They invest because they feel like they've met someone special. Someone who's sharp, obsessed, and going to win, and has created this emotional aspect that they want to be a part of. So your job isn't just to inform them about what you're doing, but to make them feel deeply why you were amazing and feel the same reasons why you have decided to go on this journey as well. And once you get that, then everything kind of changes in your funding round, and investors will start to lean into how you actually build out your funding round in the right way. So the next time you're preparing for an investor meeting, I just want you to remember this 4-step system, right? So number 1, you need to decide the emotion that you want to create. in that meeting or in the way in which you talk. Number 2, define the specific action that you actually want them to take. Number 3, use stories to create that emotion. And then number 4, guide them through the funnel from curiosity to urgency and make sure you're doing it at the correct time and the right amount. So try this in your next investor conversation and let me know in the comments, what emotion are you going to focus on creating? And what specific action do you want them to take at different parts? And as a reminder, if you want to get more detailed breakdowns and tips from me to your inbox, subscribe to the link below. You'll get 4 AI tools to help you fundraise once you do it too. So it's a really beneficial thing for you that's going to save you hours upon hours. But look, this is great and all, but what about when you can't actually find and meet investors? Check out this next video where I give you a detailed breakdown of exactly how to build your own investor network by using the AIR framework.